we got out of those pilots, on average, a 32% increase in sales accepted opportunities.
So how do you kind of move from that dabbling, ChatGPT tidying email to like some serious business and use cases?
A couple of tools that I'm going to show you today, they are set up to understand where your product's value is going to be able to come in. I don't want AI to be a buzzword. I don't want you to be a prompt engineer. In fact, if you're copying and pasting prompts right now to do anything, you're doing it the wrong way.
Welcome to the REV UP Rebellion, the podcast for revenue leaders rewriting the rules of growth. I'm your host, Abbie White, and in each episode, we are going to bring you unfiltered conversations with disruptors, top-performing leaders, and real-world experts who will share their battle-tested insights.
Today, you are in for a real treat. We have got with us Chris Briest. He is joining us from the USA. Chris is an absolute powerhouse and weapon when it comes all things AI in sales. And in this episode, we are going to be giving you real life case studies, examples, even a demo. This is absolutely a conversation, an episode not to be missed. Welcome, Chris. I like to always start with like, what conversation are revenue leaders not having right now, but they should be? And so I guess in your lens and expertise around AI, I'm curious, everyone's talking about AI, but what conversation do you want to elevate? You want to make sure it's on the table a little bit more.
Yeah. AI is all around, right? AI is a buzzword, whether that's good or bad. Me personally, I don't want AI to be a buzzword. And that's how I think a lot of leaders are seeing it right now. Again, it's on every single LinkedIn post. You can't scroll more than 2 posts on social media without seeing something AI related. So I think a lot of leaders that I talk to are struggling with how do we take this from being a buzzword into something that's usable, actionable, right? We're actually driving results with it. And I think, the first step that I see a lot of teams take is they're rewriting emails, they're, maybe copying and pasting a couple of prompts, and they're like, ooh, this is, kind of cool. But at the end of the day, you don't see results from that. And I think that's where, again, a lot of executive leaders start to get stuck, is they're like, well, how do we go a little bit further with that? So I think a lot of them know that the writing's on the wall and they're going to have to get in front of it at one point or the other. So I think most leaders are really trying to look for what is that point of entry to where I can give my team the skills that they need. We know that it's going to be impactful, and we're not just going to be talking AI buzzwords and just, real basic table stakes sort of things.
Yeah. How do you bridge that gap? Because I'd agree, like from my lens, what I'm seeing, and I'd be curious if you're seeing the same on this, you've got a few people sort of dabbling, maybe like you said, tidying up your emails on ChatGPT or like very, very basic. You've got a couple people who are really leaning in hard, but I reckon it's like the 1%ers. And then there's the volume of the rest of the like 90+% overwhelmed. We know we should do something. We're not quite sure what. So how do you kind of move from that dabbling ChatGPT tidying email to like some serious business and use cases?
Yeah, I think number one is process. You have to understand like the clear through line. I'll give a topical example. I talk about like Grand Theft Auto, the video game. And if you're familiar with that, you can run around, you can do a whole bunch of things. It's open world, but you don't really understand necessarily where you're going unless you play the campaign, right? You need to have kind of a clear process to follow so you can unlock everything and really get the most out of it. And that's what I found with like AI and GPTs specifically. So I've spent the last 2.5 years now, just hyper focused on that. Pretty much as soon as ChatGPT hit the scene, whether it was how I can accelerate the enablement or how can I put it in the hands of sellers and have them be able to get the most out of it. And the kind of solution to that problem I found was giving them a really clear process. And that's part of, what I work with teams on is, as I've dubbed, GPT-powered selling. So understanding how you take your sales methodology and the approach that you should fundamentally use today, but then adapt it for AI and augment the way you work. I think augmentation and automation is a great topic for us to visit on a little bit later. But if people, again, don't understand that clear through line in that campaign, let's be honest, we're sellers, right? We don't have time to be able to sit there and kind of dawdle, especially if we're not seeing value. So I think once you learn a process, you've got, the right tools, the right prompts, and that barrier is lowered. That's where people are able to really dig in, feel more comfortable, and start to see really instant results.
So checking I've got that right, like you would work with a team and go, okay, cool, here's your sales process and methodology today that you're working to. Okay, if I map that process to what you could be doing with GPT and what else we can do to enhance it, simplify it, make it quicker. And so you're kind of building the two together. Did I get that right, or did I completely butcher that?
No, that's the end goal, right? Is just like anything, we want it to be embedded. We want you to eat, live, and breathe it. And it's not something that's here to replace everything. Like I said, it's here to augment the way that we work. So just like our entire tech stack, I think the question becomes, when do I use which tool, and which tool is going to be most advantageous for me to be able to prepare for a call, write an email, get some insights, and get some sort of intel. And eventually as a seller, you start to figure that out, right? You start here in your CRM. Maybe I go over to LinkedIn Sales Navigator. Maybe I've got a 6th Sense or a Zoom Info that I want to get some stuff from. And, brain starts rolling with all the ideas of how we're able to sell. So what I look to do is help teams identify what really their LLM of choice is, their large language model. Do they want to use ChatGPT? Big fan, incredibly dynamic, and I think serves really all the purposes that boxes that I want to check. They got something internal, that's fine too. What I want to do is be able to map that into your sales process and your sales approach. And I think another thing a lot of teams are starting to struggle with is that saturation of AI in their tech stack. Right? Every tool has AI right now, but which one's better? Which one's going to be more effective? When do you use this one over that one? So again, defining that process, but then even helping really customize that LLM and GPT experience, because I'm sure everybody watching this has at least tried to go into something and say, write me a sales message. The second you do that, write me a sales email. It's AIE, it's not quite on brand, it doesn't include all the other things. And that's the big level up that a lot of people just haven't realized yet, is how to take your internal GTM content, get it, GT or GPT and AI compatible, and how to work that into your tool. So then that way, when it is researching, writing messages, it's doing so with the context of your company, your brand, your messaging. So again, we're accelerating even more how well that message can be written up front without you having to pull out bits and pieces and maybe essentially still rewrite that entire message. So yeah, finding that clear through line, making your sales process and even your methodologies part of it. You use MedPick, your LLM should know that you use MedPick. So as you're prepping for discovery, it should be guiding you, to use MedPick and make sure you hit on those different elements.
That is so interesting. It'd be really good to dive into a couple of use cases, and then maybe after that we'll dive into a demo, because I think there's bridging the gap between, there's so much talk of, sales teams, they only spend less than 30% of their time selling, 70% of their time is admin, updating the CRM, researching that prospect, preparing for that meeting. And I think there's still a disconnect to bring to life the true superpower of how, some of the GPT use cases you've shown me can actually help. And I know when you shared your screen with me when we first met and you started demoing some things, I was like, oh my gosh, that is like what you are doing is next level. It's not this basic, 101. The places you can go are really advanced. So I think it'd be good to, bounce around some use cases maybe first to bring it to life.
Yeah, and I hate to burst some bubbles. If you're copying and pasting prompts right now to do anything, you're doing it the wrong way. You're going too slow. So yeah, we'd be more than happy to show you what we can do to go a little bit faster. But yeah, how do we reduce that non-revenue generating time? And I think there's an interesting discussion there too with some leaders of how important that time is to really dig into research. And I try to think about this through two lenses. You've got your XDRs. Turn and burn. We know the volume game right now is tough. So to sit there and tell them to do like strategic research, some, leaders go, that's too much time. We've got a marketing message, we've got a persona card, and we've got to make 6,000 calls by the end of the day. Here you go, ready, set, take off. Over the last couple of years, again, ran a number of pilots with, whether it was North America reps, India reps, London reps, just people across the globe. And what I've consistently seen is that when you have the right tool and the right process, again, all comes back to that process. We constantly saw reductions on an average of 80% in that research time, that time being able to prepare to get on the phone for a call. as much as 92%, even when you talk about like strategic selling and analyzing, as we call them here in the States, 10Ks, the annual financial disclosures. Those things are beasts. So, through that research, it's extremely important to do because that's how you're going to connect. But I think one of the things that we kind of got to break down and demystify is that when we use these tools and these processes now, we can sell a heck of a lot better than we could before, and we can do it at scale. That's what leaders love to hear too, is we're not just going to give everybody a cool tool. They're going to, bit bop boo and do some AI wizardry, but we are actually going to see the ability for a smaller team to scale, and not just to be able to do more outreach by pushing the button more and more, but by doing it with better crafted messaging that's going to be a lot more relevant. Because especially today, let's be honest, if you look at an email and it doesn't feel like it was written to you, you're done. Right? The personalization factor that we all kind of require in our lives today is very, very high. And we, especially as I think B2B folks, we know when something's just kind of that copy and paste email and we're not interested. So yeah, I think being able to reduce that time, ultimately with better messaging, increase the opportunities that we get. That was another really good stat that we got out of those pilots, is on average a 32% increase in sales accepted opportunities for SDRs. That's significant. You're saving time. You have more opportunities going over to AEs. And just to add real quick on the AEs, especially with like an enterprise AE or strategic account, they've got big deals that they need to worry about. It's not necessarily saving time. It's about having better and more precise messaging. So again, same process, same tool. Even if it's an account you already know, I'll show you a few things that you're going to be able to do to really dig in, try to find those calls to action that's going to make somebody want to get on the phone, go, yeah, this is a problem for us. Let's talk about how we're able to solve that, and really do a good job of connecting those problems and challenges back to our product, back to our value, and really, again, having AI help us be a little bit more of a curator of some of these ideas and messages, and not necessarily the creator where we're just sitting in the dark room, reading the screen, scratching our heads and going, well, what do I say next? How do I say it? What should I say different to these two personas? That takes time. And again, AI is a big accelerator in doing that.
Yeah, there's some great examples in that, and some great stats and results and like hard outcomes that you achieved. I kind of got 2 points on that. One is, it's interesting you say about, we can all now spot a mile off the, hope this email finds you well. And it's very, very AI. I feel sorry for anyone who actually used to write that before AI stole it, because you got to break that habit. I did a bit of a 100 outreach challenge that I was doing like with myself, and testing and playing around with different things and just gamifying it to make it a bit of fun. And I found that the first line, whether it was LinkedIn message, email, even just speaking to someone, if I had a really good, very, very personal hook in that first line that only I could have written for you, and it wasn't ChatGPT written, it was like I'd really personalized it to an extent of like, oh wow, then it cut through the noise. The rest of it, fine, I might have polished and played with, but that opening hook was just so personal. And I listened to a podcast yesterday talking about this, that's like, actually where we're now all writing LinkedIn posts and emails via AI with varying degrees of how much we've trained that GPT or not, and varying degrees of how much we've then polished and edited that or not. It was a really interesting point that actually some of now the genuine just written messages, or the well-trained ones like you're talking to, are just standing out so much more because there's this volume of generic. So it's creating a really interesting opportunity going full circle.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, that's where it all comes back to, I think, understanding what it takes to really have a custom and bespoke experience in there. And again, I think the challenge for a lot of organizations here is very few people have really taken the initiative to dig in and figure out what needs to happen to make that happen. I've talked to plenty of enablement people who have started to breach that, and sellers who are really interested in it. But unless you have the time and you've been able to really practice that, work with tons of other people, and be able to kind of figure out what makes that work and what doesn't, you continue to get that basic AI message. So yeah, whether it's on brand with your company or just on brand for you on it as an individual in the way that you want to sound, these are all relatively simple things that once you kind of understand like the core approach to doing this, you can solve for that, as well as a dozen other, things that you prefer, like, and, always want to see in your message, and being able to do that quite simply. Again, I think, another interesting stat that we had from that is the speed at which people could personalize an email, again, was 63% faster. So if they wanted to be able to take kind of that, generic marketing message and figure out how to massage that maybe into a multi-point cadence for a specific persona, right? Again, we can do that in a fraction of the time. And it's not just one message, it's figuring out how to have, unique and dynamic touches all along the way, being able to add value at different spots and not just keep coming back with, congratulations on your promotion. Hey, I saw it's Wednesday. Great job on waking up for another day. That stuff is played out and it's an instant delete of the email.
Yeah. And I think you're so right. Like, I genuinely believe now it's about how do I hook your attention? You think about, you see your emails in the morning and you just go delete, delete, delete if it looks generic or not for you or spam or anything like that. Same with LinkedIn messages. Like, if you cannot hook in those first couple seconds that attention, you're not going to read on. And I think that, like you said, it's going beyond that basic. On that note, should we fly into a couple examples? And for those of you who are listening, we're going to do a bit of screen sharing and some examples. We'll try and talk through it, or I'll hand that one to Chris to try and talk through it as much as we can. But we'll also put a direct link at the bottom of the show notes so that if you're driving right now and you can't watch, but you want to come back and just revisit the demo part, we'll put a direct link in the show notes so you can play along as well. Just a quick one. Since recording this conversation, Chris has changed where you can access these tools. They're no longer on the ChatGPT store. You need to head over to Chris's website, which is Augie AI, and there's a 21-day free trial so you can access them there. Now, before we jump back into the conversation, if you're enjoying it, please hit subscribe because we've got lots of future episodes coming up that I think you will absolutely love. And why not leave a comment so others can see and access the podcast too? Back to the conversation.
So yeah, more than happy to give you a demo. So the 10K Analyzer has been one of my most popular ones by far. And I think as soon as ChatGPT hit the scene, that was probably the biggest question that sales reps had is, can I put a 10K in it? What can I do with this massive 60, 70, 80 page document and be able to save myself a lot of time? So I got really passionate about that very quickly. And I'm sure, again, anyone who's dabbled in AI has probably figured out you could just throw a 10K or any sort of report and things like that in here and just say, summarize it for me. I'm going to push back. That's not valuable. You don't need a summary of it. What you need is an understanding of what's going on in there and how you can sell to that. That's the gap here, where if you really want to be able to save time, you need to be able to come in with not only a company's information, but some information about your solution, what you're selling. So if you want your AI to, again, really understand you and be able to make effective connections, these are really the two pieces of information that are required. And I can come back and talk about these just a little bit more. But just the really short example here is all I put in was a 10K from a company called Snowflake. They're a SaaS company, if you haven't heard of them.
I'm just going to jump in, sorry there. And just in case, we mentioned 10K before, just in case anyone's in the UK or Australia and not familiar with 10K, it's more around putting in, like in this instance, we're using Snowflake, like their financial report. So in Australia, it might be their annual report. It might be any other publicly available information that you can typically download, where it's obviously a listed company and a public company. And you can grab that information because it's available publicly.
Yeah, and again, like, even though I call it 10K, because that's where I think a lot of sales minds will go to, you can put anything in here. You're selling to higher education. They put out their plan for the year. State and local government, again, they're talking about their initiatives too. So anything where you can get some insights about what's going on at a company, what's going to be important, that is all incredibly valuable information to be able to bring in here. And at least for my tools, again, they are set up to understand. You are here to sell, and its job is to help you sell by following basically a set of best practices that has been, programmed and it's learned. So all I had to say at the beginning here to get what you're going to see was, I want to position my GPT-powered selling approach to Snowflake. There you go. I don't want you to be a prompt engineer. In fact, I'm going to show you some ways to make it even more simple than this, if you can believe it. But by giving it some brand information about, my company, my GPT-powered selling approach, that annual disclosure from Snowflake, you saw very quickly, I got a pretty powerful response that starts with a summary, kind of gives me a quick breakdown of what was in there, What did we learn? But I think most importantly, and this is where sales reps start to get excited, how do I align with some of the initiatives or the challenges that are happening right now? So you see, for example, even right off the bat, it's pulling quotes out of the 10K, page 7 through 10. Here was a really important thing they said. Here's what we learned. And here's how you can help based on that. So again, we've got initiatives, expanding industry data clouds, native applications. Those are all priorities. We've got pains too. We sell to both of them. We want to help companies with what they're doing well. We also want to help companies where they're potentially struggling. So again, not just getting the summary to say they have sales efforts to large customers and involve risk, long sales cycles. Okay, cool fact. We might have been able to assume some of that even. I want my assistant to be able to kind of jump me ahead and say, well, here's the idea. And of course, you know, as the human, you always need to be the last mile. And we'll definitely talk a little bit about that. I'm never going to advocate that you just blindly read this and go, yeah, okay, send it. We want to be critical and we want to be able to give our guidance, you know, and if we see something that we think is going to be a great approach, again, that's something for us to note and make sure that we continue to share back with our assistant here so we can continue to get very specific and dialed in messaging. So again, as I go through, you see, it's now kind of recommending what's the why, what's the call to action here. We learned a lot of great stuff, but again, this GPT is designed to help prioritize what problems or priorities would likely be most impacting the business and where your product's value is going to be able to come in. And like, I cannot stress that enough. And for some reason, that is something that even the biggest SaaS products out there right now still have as a gap, is that it will do a great job searching for a current event, going, oh, you're a chief of staff. It looks like you're worried about money. Here's how we help you save money. But again, it's that very surface level. It doesn't quite get down the same way that a sales rep would. And again, by feeding it some of that brand information that I had earlier, whether it's from my messaging or even just the ideas, everything is going to be so much more in line with how I want it, how my brand is going to want to put it together. And if anyone from, say, even the marketing team was reading over these emails, they should start to see, again, their campaigns and stuff like that being reflected, because ultimately that's kind of what we're training, for lack of a better term, this GPT with. So just with a couple of folders, a simple little prompt, you can save yourself well over an hour. And again, I can dig in here. I can ask questions. I can say, you know what, I don't like any of these ideas. Give me more. What else can you find in here? And really, it can start to feel like a bottomless pit. But being the partner here, your job is still to identify, what do I feel are the best points? Which ones do I want to move forward with and I think are really going to secure, you know, this deal or next conversation?
What I love about this is, like, when I started my career, I started at IBM and we went through sales school. It's like Harry Potter, but for like salespeople. And you learn, you know, how do you research account? How do you look at their annual report? How do you find, you know, these talking points? And that process at the time, you know, that took bloody hours. It really did. And I think that there's a massive challenge right now. You know, we alluded to it earlier that sales teams, they're overwhelmed. They've got a million things to do. They're under the pump. And so if something is going to take a couple hours, realistically, it doesn't matter what enablement you've done. No one is really going to do it. You've now got to have like these tools to actually go, okay, cool. I can take the deep sales, the personalized approach to sales, but I can do it in a fraction of the time because it's easy. Whereas before it was like, yeah, I get that that's what high performing sellers are doing. They're personalizing, they're finding something timely and relevant. They're taking that deep sales approach, but it just felt probably out of reach because it's like, I just don't have the time to do that. And I know even myself, you know, you got to practice what you preach, but at points you'd be under the pump being like, because it was just so time consuming. Whereas this is just beyond time saving.
Yeah. And if I said that I've spent hundreds of hours on this, I would probably be lying. It's probably a lot more. And through that, there's been a lot of just trial and error, figuring out what works, what doesn't, and especially how to create really strong prompting in the background so you can come in, essentially give as little information as possible, but get the biggest impact and result and make it not feel like you're just working with generic AI. I mean, you'll hear me here today and any other platform that I'm on, always use the assistant analogy. Again, if I'm going to bring this assistant in to work with me, just like if we, you know, hired maybe a grad student, if I'm not doing a good job of onboarding them, giving them the pitch deck, understanding our value, our messaging, I can't really expect too much from them. And I think the big paradigm shift here for folks is that's exactly what they need to do here. They need to treat this like a real life assistant. And whether it's information they find or, things they think about, they need to be able to feed that back to them. Otherwise, your assistant's not on the same page. So, I'll even give you a quick example here. As I read through this, one of the approaches that I really like is message 2. So again, I can work with my assistant here to now do a variety of things with this message. If I feel like this is kind of holistically the right approach, I can not only tell it that and say, let's stay focused on this. Don't give me other ideas. Don't talk about unlocking Cortex or the ecosystem. I want to talk about GTM motions with my zero prompt AI. So now again, my assistant for the rest of this conversation is going to be focused on the same thing that I am. So what I'm going to try real quick is say, yeah, let's focus on this. And I want to customize this message to VP of sales. So I would say I'm usually speaking to, leaders in GTM, CRO, leaders in enablement are definitely kind of prime ICP for me and the things that we are able to offer here at Mile High. So again, right off the bat, just asking for a quick message. I can begin to, again, curate if there's some parts in here that I like. If I want to be able to maybe drop in a case study or something like that, that's easy enough for you to do. And my goal with this, especially on the public ones, I want to be able to get you, 70, 80, 90% of the way there. But as a human, you always need to be that last mile. And whether it's double checking it, bringing it out, making sure, that it reads well, and maybe, you include a case study or, something like that. But just kind of going back to what we did at the beginning, if you're coming in with brand information, this could even be a pitch deck, right? It doesn't have to be overcomplicated or as robust as mine is. But if that information's already in there, these tools are going to proactively look for it. So whether it's following your approach, your style, injecting your, win stories and things like that, it just continues to be able to make it faster and faster. So now I can not only make sure my messages are on point for personas, I can even bring in a LinkedIn URL if I want to get really spicy and specific, but I can now do this at scale, as you can imagine. If I got to reach out to 8, 9, 10 people, multi-thread them in, hopefully I'm adjusting the messages for each of them, right? I'm not just spraying and praying with the same thing. I can just kind of over and over, right? Now make it for this role. Now make it for this role, but let's focus on this aspect as well.
So I've got to ask the question because I feel like I just have like a screaming in my head of what certain people are going to be asking. I know some companies who have gone, ChatGPT is banned. There's a security concern. They just haven't really necessarily established yet what their guardrails and security policy is going to be. So it's just at the moment like a flat out, you cannot use ChatGPT for business use. So anyone who's watching this going, oh my gosh, this looks like absolute, heaven. How do you overcome some of those fears around security?
Yeah, I think the fear is real. I see the fear all the time, but I think a lot of the fear is unfounded. And here's why. There are a lot of places that people can leak information that they're not supposed to. ChatGPT is not it, right? They could post that anywhere. So why are we not focused on all these other things as well? Maybe we are a little bit. And also, as we're talking to sales reps, I think the concern is sometimes a little bit overinflated because I usually ask like, well, what is it that these reps have that is so proprietary? Right? Like, do they know every financial dollar that is going on in the company, where they're going to put that in there? Like, what exactly are you worried about going into ChatGPT? Usually that conversation brings us down a road of, well, we just need to make sure, right, we define our security posture, we disclose and remind reps, don't put things in that you wouldn't give to a customer, that sort of thing. It's kind of surprising, just with a good conversation with the InfoSec team, a lot of that can be overcome. And at least when I've worked with companies for engagements, usually explaining and just showing to them for like 15 minutes that, I'm not even going to connect to any of your APIs. I'm not bringing in anything proprietary. I'm literally taking a pitch deck, maybe some marketing assets that you're, posting on walls and sending in emails every single day. And then I'm going to teach your reps how to do what they're already doing, but at super speed. So I think, again, it's just kind of demystifying and help them understand what's actually going on. And then also letting them know that, we acknowledge that there is potential risk, and that throughout, enablement engagement, iterating and reminding people, right? Be thoughtful. And if you want to put it in front of a customer, don't necessarily put it in ChatGPT.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the demo you just gave, the Snowflake example, that's publicly available information. That's not, yes, it's got financials and so on, but it's a document that Snowflake are publishing. It's publicly available, so it's something you can find in Google. It's not necessarily from that perspective, anything that is, sensitive.
Yeah, and again, from my document that I uploaded, it's about 7-8 pages, but it has everything from, again, describing my solution, some case studies, marketing material, my ICP, who do I like to target, what are the value levers for them that I want to be able to hit on. Again, this is all pretty table stakes GTM content. So I think, again, by kind of helping security teams get past the idea that we're not putting anything scary in there, we are kind of reinforcing the importance to be thoughtful about that sort of thing. Or, customer has you under NDA for something. Again, you're under NDA. Don't share it with your assistant in this case too. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that what's interesting actually is I've seen the opposite of actually some companies who have massive sensitivity. So for example, medical, where, hang on, our information needs to be 100% correct and accurate. There are big things at stake if we get this wrong. I've actually seen some of those go more advanced with building their own GPTs because they're like, whoa, everyone's going to be doing it anyway. We would rather them do the GPT that we've set up that shows this is the accurate, correct information rather than we know people are otherwise going to do it anyway, and we don't want them just doing it openly on ChatGPT when there's so many sensitivities around medical, like what you do and don't say and all that sort of thing. I've probably butchered that point, but you get what I mean. Like I've seen some of those types of companies actually move faster.
Yeah, I hope to not knock everybody out of their chairs here, but people are going to adopt it anyways, just because you say, and I'm not going to name names here, but I work with plenty of people just in like one-to-one coaching where their work laptop is not able to do it. So they got to rely on their personal laptop, and then maybe they're using their phone, and like, we're creating more risk. I don't think we mitigated risk by doing that. We're now opening up more devices. More devices are talking and sharing information. I would be much more concerned about that than anything else. And it's interesting that you bring up healthcare. Actually, somebody that I was speaking with recently is working with a company that is, again, training their own LLM. Of course, they want it internal. They want it secure. They want to make sure it's well behind the firewall. And to your point, it needs to be spot on. Like there's almost no room for error. So whether it's the tuning or just the extra training that goes into that, it is definitely a very high degree. But I think, to that point of making sure that you get valid data back, I know that's something, regardless of industry, that a lot of people are concerned about. And a very common question I get is, what about hallucinations? I'm sure everybody has seen it. It's like, I asked ChatGPT what 2 + 2 was, and it gave me 5. Okay, first of all, the internet will lie to you. Gasp, everybody, hold on here. One of the things, though, that stands out in the prompting that I do, whether it's for public tools or custom tools, is a lot of layers to be able to avoid that. When you ensure it has a really fundamental understanding of what it should be doing and shouldn't be doing, just like if you hired an assistant, you can bring that down to an almost near zero number. I can truthfully count on probably one hand in the last 2 years how many people I've had come up to me and there was a mistake that was actually like substantive instead of just being, oh, it said this company was founded in 2008. I think it was actually founded in 2010. It was something else then. That's one of those things you do have to have a little bit of trust in what you're looking at, but also being the last mile as that human. Just as if you found something on the internet, you might want to try to validate that, read the full page or paragraph that you found that in, and not just, take that out of context and run with it.
Yeah, but you could prompt for that, right? Like on your prompt, you could be able to then really quickly and easily validate and do that I really like that concept of the last mile, and do that last mile check.
Yeah, and that's so good example. So as kind of part of the prompting in there, it's constantly told, we beat it to death that your job is to tie my solution and value directly to problems and issues that you see stated definitively. You must find a quote. You must review that quote, understand X, Y, Z, and then associate that back to my. So really you give it no wiggle room, right, to be able to think or do anything else. And again, one thing people mentioned to me when they've just kind of tried the generic ChatGPT is they're like, well, it made up a use case. It just threw something in there. And I was like, well, did you tell it that it shouldn't and that it should use yours? No. Well, again, crap in, crap out. You don't tell it the things that you want, then you can't really expect it back. And this then becomes the barrier. The rep is like, well, I don't want to have to tell it. That's dumb. I agree. You shouldn't have to do that every single time. That's way too much that you got to overcome already. So here you go. Here's a free tool that already knows how to do that and is completely in line with the way that you're thinking about selling.
Yeah, I love that. That is such a good example.
Another very popular one for research and creating sales messaging is called my SDR BDR tool. Again, if you just go into the GPT store, search the team SDR, you're going to be able to find it very quickly. But just kind of give you a quick example of like where this can really go. So I created a tool about 2.5 years ago now that I've dubbed SalesBot. SalesBot is, again, a tool that uses what I call zero prompting. You don't need to put in, I'm this person, I want to do this thing, help me, blah, blah, blah. No, you jump right in and you go, let's fire up prospect time. I need to go out and prospect into, in this case, we'll talk about Endor Labs. So immediately after one word, you should already be seeing exactly the stuff that you're going out today to look for as a sales rep. I hope everybody listening who sells is trying to understand their company, what it is they do, how they fit into the industry, and how they make money, right? That's a few things that we want to know right off the bat. And again, you see in this tool, this is fully customized to me and my brand. This is literally what I use. And if I was going to go reach out to somebody from Endor Labs, which I am, this is exactly where I would start. I practice exactly what I preach. I start off by using a command to be able to get this overview, start to get kind of, again, just a general understanding. I have other commands that are built in here where if I now want to get a better sense of their performance, their revenue, and what's going on, again, I want a zero barrier for me or any salesperson to get this information quickly. So again, I'm literally just saying to it, revenue. There's a few other commands that are built in to help bubble up the things that, again, as a seller, we need to wrap our heads around so we can be more strategic and stop showing up with persona cards and marketing messages. There's one thing I can stop in this world. I really hope that it is that. And again, you see as it spits everything out, not only am I getting a lot of great information, which I think, again, table stakes for a GPT, it gives me information. This is where the power is. Because I have it customized, or because, let's say, you brought your pitch deck or your marketing material, we're not just reading about problems, we're identifying solutions for those problems. And, I can look through here, I can do potentially, a variety of different pieces of research. And if maybe I'm a new seller, I don't really know. I'm like, give me some ideas. There's even a command in here that's called POV, point of view, where your sales bot now comes up with a hypothesis based on what we've learned and offers what it believes to be the strongest approach. And again, how does it know that? Well, through prompting, understanding your information, and being able to make these strong associations. So you can figure out what to offer, problems that you're going to solve, potentially who you can reach out to, and then again, some ideas for what that messaging can start to sound like. And again, this is all clearly understanding a process. And if you're just like freestyling in ChatGPT, that can be a little bit hard. This is built with, we'll call it a generic process, but I think the approach most sellers should know. High-level research, strategic thinking, identify a call to action, and now let's start making some messages that are specific to the person or the title that I have to be able to reach out to. So you saw here in just about 3 minutes, and again, let's be fair, I wasn't even really reading it over, but just as I glance at these, I'm already seeing a couple of things that I'm feeling decently strong about. So this is just, again, a quick example of when you create enough customization, how quickly you can go. And again, this is something that I help teams with. I also help individuals with who maybe aren't necessarily part of an organization that's ready to adopt, but they are. and they want to move faster and maybe be the case study for the rest of the team. So this is something that anyone can do. It just takes a little bit of learning. And again, I think, with somebody like myself, we're able to make that go much, much faster and be, a stronger product than you might come up with otherwise.
What sort of time does that typically take you? So if, someone listening is like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. Is there typically, because what I'm finding is like the speed now is just increasing so much. Everything's moving so fast. So what sort of time does it take to embed something like this in your organization? And I know that's probably a bit of a how long's a piece of string question.
Yes, it's very long. No. So for something like this, again, obviously the question is degree, but just thinking about on an individual level. So I, again, coach a lot of people individually, and I would say within the first 2 hours, they're set up and running. Basically, I give them this framework. They're able to utilize my tool. I help them understand what pieces of information from their company they need, how to bring that in here and leverage it. And usually if we're doing like, a 3-hour coaching engagement, after 2 hours, they're set up, they're using the tool. Now they're working deals, and I'm just coaching them how to be able to move faster, how to be able to get the most out of this. And that's when the lights come on. That's probably my favorite part of all of this, is people seeing that once they brought that brand information in here, how easy that was, but now just the orders of magnitude that it is more powerful.
Yeah. Are you seeing a use case for this as well for more junior sellers who this is also helping keep them on track and learn, because it's prompting them, have you considered your point of view? Have you considered, the other elements of the sales process? So it's almost keeping them on the sales process rather than, traditionally you'd learn it maybe on your onboarding if you're lucky, and then you'd forget it and then you'd go off the rails. And in a way, is it kind of helping us have a higher standard of selling, because to some degree it's actually helping keep us on track?
Yeah. One of the interesting things that came out, tools like this, and this is the tool that I've been using with global teams, it's a leveler. You've been in sales for 20 years. You've been at this company for, 5 of them already. You know everything. It was really able to bring performance in line with, not just them, but even bringing those sellers a little bit more to the middle. Again, it was the great equalizer. But as somebody who's been doing, training enablement for my entire career, I have never seen anything that's able to accelerate somebody's ability to onboard and get their time to first deal as something like this. And as soon as I started rolling this out in onboarding, I can still remember the class had a couple of very tenured sellers in there. By the end of the month, the feedback was, I have never felt so comfortable, so confident, and ready to get on the phone after 30 days at any company as we did here. And again, not just because of the great enablement that we had, but again, you have this assistant in your pocket. So whether you're learning something in, onboarding, you want to collaborate, ask some questions, you got to do your certification at the end or something like that, and you want an assistant, or you've graduated, you're getting ready for your first call, and you're hyperventilating. You're like, I don't know what to say. What does this persona care about? Oh, shoot, what do we even sell again? You've got that assistant there 24/7 to be able to come in and jump in at really any point and ask it for anything that you need.
That's actually a brilliant example I hadn't really considered. I was having a conversation with someone the other day, and one of their biggest challenges to scaling was, how do I onboard new people faster? Because at the moment it's taking some of the senior team so much time to be able to get that knowledge sharing, and they're sort of, scaling up. So they're not at that point yet where there's the playbook or whatever, but this is so practical and actionable that I love that fact that that's also a brilliant use case, because you can be a super experienced seller, but you've not sold, in your instance, mile high AI before, and so you don't necessarily know how it necessarily fits with your offering. It's a brilliant example.
And I challenge tenured sellers to this all the time. Be an old dog, but learn a new trick here. Even if you've sold this sale 16 times, I know but in this scenario, let's do a little bit of deeper research and let's see what other little, value nuggets you might be able to bring out here. And as you're having these conversations, continuing to be able to build up value and find those insights. I'll actually give you one example I absolutely love to talk about. I had somebody join, this was at my previous company, join one of my open office hours, where as this was kind of growing and people were grabbing on, I think it was like every Friday. I'd be open for an hour. I'd walk people, through how to do this stuff. Tenured rep, really solid guy. Brandon, shout out to you. Came in, he was already halfway through a deal. He knew what was going on. He chose to use that deal as part of our practice, and we were nearing the end of the quarter. Well, as we were doing our research, he had actually found out that this company he was going after had recently announced a partnership that he hadn't seen with another organization who happened to be a current customer of ours at the time. Through that, he was able to not only get two execs connected, those two executives actually knew each other from a past life. Through that connection, almost instantly, we became the vendor of choice, and he closed with like an $800,000 deal right before the end of the quarter, right when he needed to. And I thought that was just such a great example of, not just somebody experienced in the middle of the deal, just being like, well, what else can I find? But the instant impact, and again, as somebody who's done training long enough, and we've all been through the MedPick trainings and stuff like that, and you're like, here's a new methodology, hope it works over the next 6 months. This is instant. As soon as you adopt it and you start clicking the buttons, the thing is being done. The results are there. It's just a matter of, are you going to lean into it and adopt it? Are you willing to kind of, critique the current state of your deal and see what else you might be able to find? He did, and he got a big result out of it.
And what I also like, pulling from that example and building is also, I think sometimes we always think about this as like prospecting for new business and net new. We don't know the company. And what do we find out about them? I actually think in my experience, like some of the highest risk was always existing clients, because you almost went native. You stopped watching the news or seeing what else was going on because, I know them. I speak to Bob all the time. So in a way, some of your highest risks was, I never forget, one of the team that I had and I worked with, we were about to go into a client and I'm like, right, have you done your homework? He's like, nah, I know them. And then we were looking them up and they just announced their interim results like the day before. So we were like, quick, like checking it out. So you could walk in and be like, hey, great results. I saw that, fantastic, blah, 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 and build on it. So I think that I really am promoting the conversation of this isn't just about prospects, i.e. net new. It's also existing, because you might not have seen that partnership happen. You might not have seen that new person or certain changes. So I think it's got to be used in both.
Yeah. And again, for my approach and some of my tooling, my best ICP is going to be AEs and BDRs. You're 100% right. Andre, this is agnostic of role. I love talking to post-sales teams. And I love going through what you just talked about. And actually, one of the companies I'm speaking with right now about an engagement is really trying to look at account managers and CSMs as well. Because whether we're upselling, cross-selling, just inheriting a deal and needing to get ready for our first business review with them and making sure we can show up, sound good. Maybe you just inherited a whole bunch of accounts, right? Because teams and things like that never change. So how do you get up to speed and be able to show up and actually contribute value in your first QBR and not just show up and kind of roll along, maybe ask some questions, get the lay of the land yourself, and hope everybody is smiling and happy with things. So whether it's account planning, mutual action plans, which that crosses the bridge of pre and post close, this can be used for anybody. Solution engineers, listen, you got to get up and you got to pitch value. Oh, I love that argument with solution engineers. I just demo. Oh, you demo and you're explaining why us, why now. This is why you should pull out your checkbook. So don't just show them the tool. Use the notes from your AEs, but even do a little bit of research yourself. And dare I say, come up with a story to tell. Something else that I've been working on a lot more with clients is how to be able to really accelerate and do excellent storytelling with your research, translating it into slides. And then even using free tools like Sora to be able to make it very visual. So if we're talking about, improving customer service, so the customer is more inclined to, engage with the website, I can help that leader actually see that taking place as I'm describing it, and keeping it, with an actual event and a call to action, not just, telling a generic story.
I love that. So many different examples there, from like QBR, account planning, post-sales, solution engineers, leadership. Oh, it's so many examples. Are there any use cases you feel like, we haven't got to that one yet, Abbie, and we really need to talk to that, or myths we need to bust? I feel like we've done a bloody good job getting through quite a few. Are there any that you're thinking, I've still got listeners hanging on to some we haven't touched on?
Man, it's an onion. I mean, at the end of the day, if you need to reason with data, you can do it in a GPT. It's just a matter of how easy is it going to be out the gate. I think one thing I've always found interesting, but has been hard to tackle, at the beginning of the year, you get your TAM. Hopefully it's cleaned up and prioritized and has everything removed, but maybe it doesn't. And so reps are always like, how can I put my TAM into here and make sure that I get XYZ or prioritize these things? That's a real popular one. I think, another really key discussion around, tools usage and kind of how it fits into all these different roles is automation versus augmentation. I feel like for the last 2 weeks, I don't know if it's that I can't stop talking about it or everyone I'm talking to is bringing it up. It's one of the two. There's so many tools out there, though, that do a great job of automating. And I think automation can and is helpful. And, if you want to get into the discussion of are BDRs or SDRs going to be replaced, we totally can. I've got a strong opinion on that one. But at the end of the day, we are augmenting the way that people work. Even if everything gets automated up front, and the reason that you're calling in is because you got a great AI message that made sense, at the end of the day, there is still a human. And I think for a long time, there is still going to be a human who needs to be able to show up and carry that conversation through. Same thing applies. How are you going to show up with an understanding of who they are, what they do, what they need, and the different ways that you're going to be able to add value? Again, not just showing up and trying to go through the motions, but showing up strategically. The thing that just differed here is maybe you didn't have to do the outreach initially, right? AI generated that for you, but you still need to be the expert. You still need to be the expert. And that's, again, the process that we want to get people in is no matter when they're jumping in to be the expert or how they're jumping in to be the expert, they understand exactly how to get started. So all those conversations can be strong ones. And I'll give you another stat. 40% increase in confidence across the board, again, average, when speaking with stakeholders for, reps in our pilot groups who use these tools. So again, whether you're new to the job, you've never really talked to this persona before, you're trying to figure it out, maybe you're just trying to get a little bit stronger in your conversations and be able to be more adept at, speaking to the CMO, the CRO, and the VP of sales all at the same time. That can definitely be challenging, but it's very achievable. You've just kind of got to understand how to get started.
I think that's fascinating. And I want to circle back to the point that you just made around you've got a strong opinion on are sellers going to be replaced, because it does. Yes, there's a lot of hype about it at the moment. You see it everywhere of like, you're not going to be replaced. The person using AI is going to replace you. And like, we're hearing that sort of all the time. I'm definitely interested in your opinion, because I think that some people would be nervous to go, well, hang on, if I can reduce, the amount that a sales team is doing by 50% because this does it faster, then hang on, and I made up 50%. That's just a random stat, me making it up. Actually, do I need to reduce my sales team? And I've currently got 20 sellers, and actually I could do the same with 10 sellers. What's your viewpoint on this whole big topic?
Yeah. So there's the short term and the long term. And I mean, you can't deny the fact that companies are making moves to be able to say, I don't want to hire headcount. I want to have less headcount. Yes, automation is happening. I think at the end of the day, GTM teams are just augmenting the way that they go to market. And I am not excited that impacts people, right? I do not want that to impact people. And that's why I want to empower the people first. And again, make sure that they are being competitive in the marketplace. So even if they are, let's say, an XDR at a current company, they decide to do a lot more automation. My call to action is I want you to be in a position to then either move into an AE role, right? Whatever the work is now kind of pushing you towards, maybe you're not making the call. You could be the person who receives that call, though. There's other things that you're going to be able to do. So, well, yes, there's going to be an immediate impact, and the organization changes and the process changes. I encourage people to look at this a little bit more from the point of view that they just need to learn how to augment the way that either they're going to work as an individual, or look at how the company is going to be augmented and how do they position themselves, right, to be able to kind of keep up with that and not just go, I'm just another XDR who knows the same thing as everybody else. That makes it hard to be competitive, and you absolutely put yourself in a riskier position.
It's interesting because a lot of the stuff I'm listening to and reading at this point in time is actually quite interesting because everyone's kind of saying, yes, there will be, through AI advancing, there will be job cuts, and like no one's excited about that. There will absolutely be changes there. However, what's really interesting is then the increase of the desire and need for human skills. I was listening to a really interesting podcast yesterday with Simon Sinek and Stephen Bartlett, and they were talking about like the demand for the human skills, because in a world that's becoming very AI and very augmented, some of those human pieces are actually sort of standing out. And so there's that real interesting piece where from a sales and go-to-market perspective that we're talking to, it is 100% going to be augmented, but that human skill piece is actually increasing as well in this scenario. So it's quite interesting to kind of listen to some of those viewpoints.
Yeah, and I won't necessarily name names here. I was talking to a very large CRM company here recently, and it was very interesting to hear how focused they were on the automation first touch and not really thinking about how that fits into anything else and where the value there does or doesn't lie. Because again, getting all these messages out the door is great, but we're going back to playing a numbers game. We're going back to hoping that we hit enough people with the right-ish message that we get a certain percentage and we can move on. Again, we're augmenting not just the way that we work, but AI is changing just the way that every company is going to market. So even if you're going to get an AI automation, I would really be curious to see how confident are you in that message. And this company was very, very, very focused on just getting the message out the door, making kind of what we talked about before as just this high level connection of, you have customers, we help customers who have customers, we should have a conversation. What did we do different there other than send that email quicker? Again, people want personalization, relevancy is king. And if we're not doing those two things, why are we expecting to get a higher win rate or a higher open rate? It doesn't make sense to me.
And to me, it goes beyond that. It's also damaging. Like I opened my LinkedIn this morning in my email, and in both inboxes, I had messages just like, Abbie, we specialize in helping businesses with sales. We could really help, Sales Redefined, with your sales. And you're just reading this message and you're like, oh, God. And I just look at that and go, if that's your approach to prospecting and that's your approach to sales and you're targeting me to use your company for prospecting and that's how you prospect, and like, oh my gosh, I don't even have the time to explain how I feel about that. But I think that it's gone beyond just bad conversion. It's actually brand damaging to have such a bad approach.
Yeah. It's super boilerplate like that. One thing I've started having a little bit of fun with is I've got a custom GPT for this. I'll usually put that message into this custom GPT and it will help me come up with some ideas on how I can respond and basically say something like, yeah, I know personalization and outreach can be really hard, especially when you're doing it at scale. However, when you have tools like the GPT-powered selling solution, you're able to, and I basically end up like trying to pitch them. I have secured coaching engagements that way too. But again, it's trying to even just show people, like, I understand where you're at, right? I'm going to empathize with you a little bit here, but I'm going to call you out. Like, this is generic. What are you doing? Why are you not using these other tools? Again, if you didn't even take the time to message something on my profile, again, even the super table stakes things that we're sitting here going, let's get away from that and do better. Again, that's a message I'm not going to engage with. Yeah.
I love that. That's so funny. That reminds me of, there was a TED talk with a guy, I think his name was James Veach, who would receive spam emails like, I'm Winnie Mandela and I need you to transfer me $10,000. And he decided to like spam the spammers, and he would engage in a conversation and go back and like ask all these things. And he did a TED talk on it. It's brilliant. You're going to be the AI and the GPT version of that.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately it gets attention, but it is kind of crazy to me. We're in the middle of 2025. I think we've been talking for a couple of years now about how the original outbound motion is dead. Whether it's the email spam filters or the degree of personalization we expect, so on and so on. The game has changed, but everybody seems to refuse to change. And we're just kind of banging our heads against the wall, right? Doing the definition of insanity here. But again, this all comes back to, if you don't have an understanding of the tools, how to bring your brand into the tools, and the kind of process that you're trying to execute within them, It is. It's just another shiny thing that does some cool stuff potentially, but you can't really master it, right, until you learn a little bit more. So try not to blame the individual sellers too much. At the end of the day, they're following what the company is telling them. And I love when some of the individual sellers become champions and want to create that change in their team and be that catalyst. But really, at the end of the day, there's just a lot of leadership that kind of needs to step up and really just choose to press the engage button and say, we're ready to do this. Let's take the step forward and, let's use some solutions that work.
I think you have just nailed it and couldn't have said it better. So on that note, if there are leaders listening who are now really inspired, how do people reach out at you? How do people connect? How can you, how does Mile High AI help businesses? I think we've given some pretty good examples, but if you kind of had a note to leave leaders with on how you can start to bridge that gap, like what would that be?
Yeah, that's what I'm here for. MileHighAIConsulting.com, GPT-powered connect with me on LinkedIn, all that good stuff. Really, I'm focused on two things. One, I love to help sellers individually. So whether you work for a big multinational company, maybe you're the founding AE at a really small startup and it's literally just you. I work with them all. We can spend just a few hours together and I'll show you how to turn the lights on. And like we said before, see instant impact, which sounds like a high expectation. We'll meet it every single time. If you are a leader, though, you've seen the writing on the wall, you're listening to this and you're saying, you know what, we are ready to step forward. There's a lot of places to enter in that. And I'm not expecting every leader to say, come in and transform our GTM, right? We see the risk. We understand there's a billion other priorities going on. But there's some really simple steps that we can take together to be able to not only introduce AI, but introduce the right kind of AI with the right approach and process. I keep coming back to that because it is the fundamental thing here that will make it work or not work. You can't just drop another tool in their belt and hope that they're going to use it and see results. So if you are a leader and you're looking to just kind of get that training and workshop in front of people, if you are looking to go a little bit further, whether it's making AI-powered playbooks, taking your sales plays that you use today, bringing them into this sort of tool, talk about acceleration. Wow, we're not just doing, research and making these, associations, which in and of itself is incredibly powerful and more than a lot of people are doing right now. You're going to put this thing on steroids. You can really get through a sales play, again, with your assistant faster than you ever imagined. And then the benefit for the marketing team, people, again, are on brand. They're using your messages. Your competitive intel is actually being utilized and brought in and not just sitting there paid for and underused. So if you're trying to transform, again, a BD team, if you're just trying to even maybe get your AEs to work a little bit smarter, a lot of companies that are going through hypergrowth right now, trying to figure out how to support that without just throwing headcount at it. Right? This isn't 2010 SaaS where you can just hire a billion people and go, man, we got this. You need to do more with less. And that's exactly what AI is able to do for us. So really, I'm here to meet people where they are, understand exactly what's kind of important to them for business priorities, what they want to drive, and then ultimately bring those priorities, their brand, their process, their methodology, all into a single tool in a single place, ChatGPT or otherwise. Again, I'm agnostic to that. And show them what the path forward is and how we get those results.
Chris, you have been absolutely incredible. Thank you so much. We will put links to Chris, to his website, to Mile High AI in the show notes. We'll also put links to the demo and some of the other resources that you mentioned. You have been so generous with your knowledge, which I've got to say, just hats off to you. So many people are very cagey about what they're learning, what they're doing, what they're playing with. So thank you so much for your generosity and knowledge sharing. It's been incredible. Your brain just blows my mind.
No, I appreciate you having me on here, Abbie. And yeah, at the end of the day, I really fundamentally believe all this information needs to be democratized. AI literacy is one of the most important things that anybody can be learning, especially people who are entering the workforce. I believe that everybody needs to be able to thrive for this. And that's what I wake up in the morning for.
Thank you, Chris.
Awesome. Thanks, Abbie.
If you enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to subscribe and follow so that you get our unfiltered conversations every single week.